I analyzed every single video uploaded by the top 100 YouTubers to figure out how they get views. And after studying things like how long are their titles, how much text do they put in their thumbnails, what kinds of words do they use in their videos, and a bunch of others, I uncovered 21 insights that will hopefully help you get more views than a Minecraft brainroll video. But it turns out the top 100 YouTubers combined have uploaded 93,421 videos and spoken over 286 million words. To put that into perspective, it'd take me about 4.5 years to manually watch through all of those videos. And that's assuming I don't even take breaks to eat, sleep, or help mum fix her Wi-Fi for the 27th time.
Have you tried turning it on and off again?
But luckily, I have a plan to analyze all this data and figure out what the top YouTubers are doing in their videos that go on to get so many views. And here it is. Step 1, child labor. No, so first I used the YouTube API to make a list of the top 100 most subscribed YouTubers in the world, excluding any brand, kids, or non-English channels. Go on you, kid. Step 2. Then I paid my developer friend to build a custom software program that will download every single long-form video, title, thumbnail, and transcript. And then finally I begged my data scientist friends to use all of the data to reverse engineer the videos from these top 100 YouTubers. And doing all of this left me with a ton of insights and enough graphs to make Statista weep tears of jealousy. And today I'm going to show you 21 of the most interesting graphs to help you understand how the top YouTubers create their content. Starting with clickability. See, if you're a YouTuber, you know that getting viewers to click on your videos is more important than remembering to disconnect your phone from the living room speaker. So how do the top 100 YouTubers create their titles and thumbnails? Well, first let's look at thumbnails, and I've got 8 interesting graphs to show you. And the first thing I wanted to know is how many words do the top YouTubers put in their thumbnails? To find out, the custom software I built ran every thumbnail in our list through AI that identified how much text was in it. It kind of works like ChatGPT, except it can analyze 93,000 thumbnails in one go and its UI looks like shit. And here's what I found. This graph shows the percentage of top YouTubers who put text in their thumbnails year over year. So we can see from about 2006 to 2010, less than 40% of the top 100 YouTubers tended to put text in their thumbnails. But that all changed and more started putting text until about 70% tended to put text in their thumbnails in 2013. Interestingly though, from there, things started to drop off a little bit. And if we just look at data from the last year, you can see that 41.6% primarily don't have any text at all, and 58.4% do. And bear in mind, if a thumbnail has any clearly visible words in it, for example, like text on this shirt or this sign, it's going to be lumped into this 58%. So if we excluded those, the percentage of top YouTubers primarily opting for no text thumbnails would probably be even higher. So based on this data, it looks like a surprising amount of big YouTubers prefer to show rather than tell when it comes to thumbnails. In saying that, 58% of the top YouTubers do usually put text in their thumbnails. And out of those creators, this graph shows how many words on average they put in their thumbnails. And it shows us when the top channels do add text, it's usually between 1 to 3 words. Unless you're most critical, who can somehow get away with thumbnails like this. Jokes aside though, if we were to create a checklist that would help you model the top YouTubers' thumbnails, it looks like the first item on that list would be either have no text in your thumbnails or keep the amount of text between 1 to 3 words. And if you thought that was interesting, just wait until you see some of the data coming up. Because the thing is, not all words are equally clickable. So when the top YouTubers do include text in their thumbnails, what kinds of words do they add? Well, I use software, and when I say I mean the developer who's much smarter than me, to analyze the actual words in the thumbnails themselves. And after doing all that, here are some of the most interesting insights. Starting with language point of view. Now, language point of view is basically about who's talking and who's being talked to. And there are 4 main language points of view. First person language is when the speaker talks about themselves. You'll see words like I, me, my, we, and our in their thumbnails. I'll show some examples of first person language thumbnails on screen. Now, second person language is when the speaker talks directly to the audience, using words like you or your. Again, some examples will be on the screen. Third person language is where the creator talks about someone else, not themselves, not their audience. So you'll see words like he, she, they, and them. And lastly, we have a non-personal or neutral point of view. Examples of this would be phrases like exposed, do this, or Alabama, Arkansas. So the question is, what point of view do top YouTubers use in their thumbnails? Well, if we look at this graph, which is actually more of a circle, it shows us that 100% of the top 100 YouTubers primarily use neutral language in their thumbnail text. Now, when I first saw this, I thought it might be some sort of mistake. So I also did this analysis on a per video level rather than per channel. And when we do that, we can see 91.6% of the thumbnails use neutral language, 3.6% using first person, and 2.7% using third person. So if we're to continue building out our check checklist, it seems like using neutral words in thumbnails would be our next item. So the top YouTubers use neutral words in their thumbnails, but how complex are those actual words themselves? Well, we use the Flesch-Kincaid readability tests that measure how difficult a passage of text is to understand. Now, the exact mathematical equation used is up on screen right now, but for those of us who aren't mathematologists, here are some examples of how the scoring system actually works. The text in this thumbnail would be given a rating of 1.2, this thumbnail scored a 2.1, and this thumbnail scored a whopping 11.5. Now, this graph shows the typical thumbnail text complexity across the top YouTubers we studied, and we can see the vast majority sit between a 1.2 and a 1.9, meaning the average 7-year-old should have no problem reading and understanding them. Makes sense, given the average thumbnail only has 2 to 3 words in it. Pretty much any 2 to 3 word sentence is going to be pretty easy to read. But if we were to add this to our checklist, if you wanted to model the top 100 YouTubers, you'd want it to score between 1.2 and 1.9 on the FKGL readability test. But obviously there's more to a thumbnail than just the words used in it. What about colors? So I built software similar to the one we use to analyze text in thumbnails, except we use it to identify colors in thumbnails. For example, if we look at this thumbnail, it has multiple colors like red, green, and white. But if you look closely, or maybe even zoom out, you can see there's a lot of blue. The sky, the crowd, the collar of Jimmy's shirt, and there's even a blue tint on the sky on the right-hand side here. And so for this thumbnail, our software identified the primary color as blue. This thumbnail also has multiple colors, but the primary color would be purple. Primary color of this thumbnail is white, and by now you probably get the idea. And when we looked across the top 100 YouTubers' thumbnails in the last year, this graph shows you what we found. So 52.3% of the top YouTubers have black or very, very dark gray as their primary thumbnail color, followed by regular gray, then white, then red, orange, blue, brown, and green. Now, at first glance, it might seem surprising that a dark and boring color like gray is so common amongst the top YouTubers. Maybe it's so common because it's versatile. But regardless, if we just take the data at face value here and continue building our checklist, seems like the top YouTubers like to use black/dark gray, regular gray, white, red, orange, or blue. But what about the actual objects inside of thumbnails, like faces, for instance? Well, this graph shows the percentage of top YouTubers' thumbnails in the last year that had faces in them. We can see 91.3% of top YouTubers tend to put faces in their thumbnails, with 8.7% not, which makes sense because we're analyzing the biggest YouTubers in the world here. There are probably millions of people who recognize their faces, and so including their faces in their thumbnails will grab the attention of those people. And this might be a good point to mention an important caveat when it comes to data like this. See, just because a thing shows up in the data, it doesn't mean that thing caused that video to get so many views. For example, all pro basketballers are tall. That's an objective data point. However, that doesn't mean basketball causes tallness. But in saying that, the reason I still find all this YouTube data I'm showing you quite interesting is, by definition, the top 100 YouTubers are very successful. And we know they've spent thousands of hours, millions of dollars, built teams around this to test their titles, to maximize their thumbnails, to improve their video retention. And so when a bunch of them all start doing the same thing, whether it's using a similar amount of words, using a similar type of words, using a similar type of colors, it could mean that that thing is inherently performing quite well on YouTube right now and might be something for you to test in your videos. In saying that though, just because this is data doesn't give you an excuse to throw common sense out the window. You need to think about all of this in context. But with all that being said, if you strictly want to create thumbnails that model those made by the top 100 YouTubers, here's your final checklist. First, when it comes to thumbnail text, use between 0 and 3 words. If you include text, use neutral language and score between 1.2 and 1.9 on the FKGL readability test. When it comes to visuals, use black/dark gray, regular gray, white, red, orange, or blue, and include a face. But thumbnails are just one big piece of the clickability equation. What about titles? Well, we actually analyzed 93,421 titles from the top 100 YouTubers, which I actually found more interesting than the thumbnail data because titles are just a line of text, so they're a lot easier to analyze. And so there are title-related graphs I want to show you that will help us build out a title checklist if we want to model the top 100 YouTubers. Now, this graph shows how many words are in the titles of these videos, and it seems like the most common range is 6 to 8 words, with the exact average being 7. Now, if we translate that to character count, we're looking at an average title length of about 42 characters. So it seems like, similarly to thumbnails, big YouTubers like to keep things short and sweet when it comes to their titles, and if you're trying to model them, you should do the same. So let's add that to our title checklist. Now, when it comes to point of view, you remember there's first person, which is me, I, our language. Second person, which is you, your language. Third person, which is they, them, he, she language, and neutral. Now, when it comes to title point of view, 69.7% use neutral language, 27% use first-person language, with second and third-person language being used by almost no one. So if we're building out our checklist strictly based on the data, you should use non-personal language, but unlike with thumbnails, it looks like you can also get away with first-person language. Now, when it comes to readability, the majority of titles seem to sit between 1.4 and 1.7, the average being 1.6, meaning again, simpler is better. And by the way, I know I'm going through all this quickly, but later on, I'm going to give you the full checklist that's going to help you summarize and remember all this stuff really easily. But before I can give you that, there's actually 3 brand new insights that apply to titles, but not thumbnails as much. And the first one I want to show you is active voice versus passive voice. Now, active voice is basically the way most people normally talk, and the structure roughly follows a someone did something layout. For example, YouTube recommended me feet pics would be active voice. It's punchy, direct, and now you're questioning my watch history. Passive voice, on the other hand, flips the structure on its head. So instead of someone did something, it would be something was done by someone. So if active voice is YouTube recommended me feet pics, passive voice would be feet pics were recommended to me by YouTube. We're communicating the same thing, except now it sounds like you're reading a BuzzFeed article. And to really bring home what that looks like, there are some examples on screen you can pause and look over. And lastly, we have neutral, which is any line of text that doesn't have a clear verb or action structure. But does all this even matter? Well, it seems like the answer is a resounding yes. This graph shows us that the top YouTubers always use neutral or active voice for their titles. Now, if we look at this on a per video level, we can see 1.6% of the top YouTubers' videos do use passive voice, but active and neutral voice are the clear winners here. But when it comes to actually writing your titles, like actually typing the words themselves, how should you format things? Well, there are a couple of different ways of typing out your titles. There is title case, which is essentially where you capitalize the first letter of every single word. There's sentence case, where you capitalize the first letter of the first word, and then the rest of the title is lowercase. There's all caps, which is kind of self-explanatory. Then there's all lowercase, also self-explanatory. And then there's mixed, which is also very self-explanatory. Now, if we look at this graph, we can see that the top YouTubers tend to use title case most frequently, with 57.3%, 28.1% use a mixed capitalization strategy, followed by 6.7% using sentence case, 5.6% all caps, and 2.2% all lowercase. And in case you've ever wondered if you should put emojis in your title,
it's definitely a no for me, dog.
93.5% don't use emojis in their titles. So if you want to model the titles from the top YouTubers, here is your final checklist. First, aim for a title length of about 6 to 8 words long. Be written in neutral language, have a complexity score of 1.6 or below, use active or neutral voice. And when it comes to typing your title, use title case, so capitalize the first letter of every word, and stay away from emojis. So on screen right now, you're going to see both of the checklists so you can screenshot them. But you may notice I didn't talk at all here about the actual video content or the transcripts from the top 100 YouTubers videos themselves. And that's because this video is getting long and I want to go to the beach. But if you're watching this in the future, that video will be somewhere on screen. You can click it, check out all the video content related insights.